Yeah. Oh, wow, that's new.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
All right, I will call this a special meeting of the Bloomfield Design Review Board for Thursday, June 3rd, 2021 to order. First, item number 2 is the roll call. I think all members are present. And item number 3 is the minutes, which I don't believe were distributed, were they? You're on mute. Jose, you're muted.
No, you'll have them before your next meeting. I didn't have time to review the last meetings. You know, I just got back to the office last week, so
Okay.
on a limited basis.
Item number 4 is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment? Hearing none. Do you have any up on your screen?
I'm looking. If anybody wants to comment, they have to raise their hands,
I don't see any.
which is at the bottom of the screen.
Right. I don't see any raised hands at the moment.
Okay, I don't see any. Actually, I should make you co-host in case.
Any old business?
Oh. So I just made you, Joe. I just made you co-host in case something happens to my internet, which I think did happen last time, briefly.
John, I don't know if it's old business, but just reminding that last meeting, Jose suggested that we, the members of the committee, send a note to Phil Shank saying that we were willing to stay on the board. And
I know some did. I don't even, quite frankly, I don't remember whether I did or not. To tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think I got a copy of one. I was copied on one, but I don't know if you sent it to Phil, you should copy me so I know we did.
okay, I sent mine to Phil directly. Sorry.
And I think I saw a copy of yours.
Yeah,
Okay.
we saw yours went through. I'm not, well, I guess if you want to continue to serve, I guess we need to send a note to Phil with a copy to Jose.
Okay.
I will do that.
So how do you want to proceed, Mark? Do we want to have the presentation? Greg isn't here.
Yeah, Greg was essentially just going to introduce Richard Sipic from TSKP Studios in Hartford, who is going to give the presentation. I assume Greg will be joining us at some point to represent the committee.
There he is.
There he is.
Okay.
Greg, the floor is yours.
Greg, we're ready for you.
You need to unmute though. There you go.
There you go.
Good evening, and I apologize, folks. I had some technical difficulties, but I am here. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect. I just want to take a few moments to, first of all, thank you all for having the Library Building Committee in front of you this evening. With me is Richard Sipic from TSKP Partners, TSKP Studios. I'm sorry, I want to get that right. Our design architects. Richard will walk through our presentation, which will go over the exterior designs and timelines. And TSKP has been working with our committee for the last 9 months. Our charge briefly is to bring a state-of-the-art modern 21st century library to town. Our goals are simple, to be transparent, inclusive, fiscally responsible, and to have a successful referendum in November. The building committee is comprised of 16 individuals. We have 9 voting members and 7 ad hoc members. And I just wanted to take a moment to recognize Mark, who is the vice chair of our committee, and Michelle, who is the secretary of our committee. And thanks to them for all of their efforts and time with respect to the project. We are diverse with respect to gender, race, party affiliation, vocation, and age. The process, in my opinion, has been very thorough and comprehensive.
Whenever you're ready.
We have involved the community. Since July 29th of last year, we've had 22 full committee meetings, 4 special meetings, and our subcommittees have met for a total of over 30 times. We conducted a town-wide survey back earlier this year, and we received more than 1,700 responses. Those responses were summarized by the consultants that we worked with along with the committee, and we shared that information with the council, and that information has been made public on our website for the town and the library. We've made over 2,000 calls to residents in town about the project. We've had 3 articles in the Messenger, 2 public informational sessions. We had one in April, which was via Zoom, and we had more than 70 participants in that session. And last month we had an in-person informational session at Mcmahon. And both of those meetings were very, in my opinion, very productive. We got a lot of information from the community. We had 4 members of the council, including the mayor, participate in each of those informational sessions. We have presented to the council twice in February, and then most recently on May 24th. At the May 24th meeting, TSKP presented its renderings with respect to both Prosser and Mcmahon. And again, I just want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to come in front of you this evening. And I am going to turn it over to Richard, who will walk through the design options with respect to the 2 locations, and we'll talk a little bit about the timeline, and we'll be more than happy to respond to any questions or comments that you may have. So thank you. Richard?
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, members of this board, and Director of Planning. As Greg said, we've been working with the building committee for quite a number of months, starting, I believe, in October. And we have gone through a number of iterations. The process actually started by a site selection. We had a townwide examination of potential sites. That process narrowed the options down. And in the end, the building committee selected the existing Prosser site and the existing Mcmahon Wintonbury Library site. There was also discussion about new versus additions and renovations. And in the end, the building committee concluded that a new building on the Prosser site was the most appropriate solution, and the addition and renovation to Mcmahon Wintonbury would be also appropriate. And I realize that Mcmahon is not part of your jurisdiction, I believe, in its role as design review board. However, I'm going to share that with you anyway. Now, some of you may already be familiar with these design concepts. I see members of this board also happen to serve, some members of this board also happen to serve on the building committee. And some of you may have attended public meetings, but some of you may have not. So I'm going to, at this point, I think, share my screen, if you will allow me to do that. Okay, so there, as I say, there are 2 buildings involved in the library planning study that we've been doing. Actually, there's a 3rd component to the library, which is the virtual library, which will allow people who don't want or need to visit the actual buildings to be able to have benefit of the library services. However, the virtual library is not part of our scope. We'll just focus on the site improvements and the building design. Starting first with the Prosser library site, which is the existing library site. And just to orient you, the street traveling north-south here is Tungus Avenue, and then it becomes Bloomfield Avenue further south. The street located here is Mountain Avenue. So the library is located, as I'm sure you all know, at the corner of Bloomfield Avenue and Tungus. Other landmarks in this area include the First Congregational Church to the northeast of the existing site, and the town hall to the southeast of the existing site across these streets. Another feature in this part of town is the Center Green, located here. And just beyond the green to the east is the Wintonbury Mall. Other landmarks include Philly Park to the north of the site, and this water course known as Washbrook, traveling southward through this part of town. The library currently exists on this site right now. And about 4 years ago, I think about 4 years ago, the town acquired a parcel adjacent to the west of the Bloomfield Library, formerly known as the Riley Lumber Site, which is located approximately here. And so that site now is incorporated into the proposed new library building project. And so we have improvements on both sides of Washbrook, and then we have a connector connecting both sides. Now, one of the things that we see here in the town center is the opportunity to create very strong pedestrian paths linking these major landmarks in the town center. And so those paths are designated here by this red and white dotted line, as you can see, crosswalks to the library site. And then there's a potential to continue that pedestrian walkway to a new parking lot to be located on the west side of Washbrook, and then in the future connecting to a pedestrian walkway that could lead you to Philly Park. And while this segment that goes north of the Riley property is not part of this scope, there is the potential for future connection for that pedestrian link.
Could I interrupt you for a second?
Certainly.
On the pedestrian stuff, were you aware of, or did you take into account the real possibility that those two significant intersections are going to become roundabouts?
Yes.
Okay.
I will show you a plan a little bit later how we've incorporated that into our thinking.
Thank you.
This intersection at the corner of Mountain Avenue and Tungus is a very significant corner. It's sort of a gathering point of all of these pedestrian walkways as they approach Prosser Library. So that becomes an important element in our design concept. In addition, the connection between the parking lot and the Prosser Library building is also a significant feature. So making this link along the southern edge of the building site is a prominent element in our design, which I will share with you momentarily. Now, if we jump to a larger scale drawing, and I'm sorry, this roadway configuration, as you observed, is the existing roadway configuration. There is the, as you say, a real possibility that that could change. So the next diagram I'll show you shows you the main level of the library, the connection that goes from the library building to the parking lot on the west side of Washbrook. And it also shows the future configuration with these two roundabouts, one roundabout located here, another roundabout located there. So whether the roundabouts occur immediately or in the future, I think the footprint will work. I think the difference, if I go back to the previous slide, you'll see is in the amount of improvements that are necessary along the public walkway and in this corner in particular. So just to compare again, this is the way it currently is. That roundabout would be about here. This road bends a little bit. As you can see, that corner area is enlarged in this configuration. So the concept here is to build a very strong connector to the parking area here. And what we show in this site plan is approximately 73 cars. Actually, this says exactly 73 cars in this former library lumber yard. And connecting to, this is the main level. There's a level below this floor plan, but this is the main level. This is the level that pedestrians would enter into the building. And there are two entrances, as you can see here on the southern side of the building. This is the main entrance into the library itself that leads into a vestibule and then into the main library room. The circulation desk is located here within plain sight of people coming and going. There's a secondary entrance as well, and this will become an important entrance after hours because it leads into the community space here, a meeting room. There's also bathrooms in this location. There's also egress stairs. And those are important along with the elevator to connect to the lower level and to the upper level. The library itself is divided into 2 floors. This is the main floor, and there's a floor up above as well. It's comprised of a large area here. This is a 2-story volume, and it's the main library room, if you will, where people can use the resources of the library. There's a connector that leads to the upper level. This is a stair that leads directly up, as well as the elevator that leads up. And then there's another stair that goes as well. But this is the prominent feature within this large room. What we would like to do is make this wall fairly transparent so that people can see activity in the library that will become important in the evening when this building is illuminated. And also to allow people within the library to look to the east to that village green, which is located just to the east of this site. This is where my arrow, my cursor is right now. So there's a need to look out of the building as well as to see activity from the public into the library itself. I think this will create a lot of excitement in the town center. On this level is also the children's library area, the teen library, potential classroom function that could be separated from the children's area, and an opportunity to create an architectural feature such as a story nook overlooking the Wash Brook down below. Right, continue to the next floor. Actually, this is a cross section. So if I were to take a cross section through the site, right through this site, and then look up northward, you would see this kind of configuration. So that floor plan I was just sharing with you is this floor plan, this level. It's just a little bit above Tunxus Avenue sidewalk elevation. It's a level floor. And then at this end, there's a connector that leads to the parking lot. There is a level below that main level, which is for handicap parking, some staff parking, as well as a connection to an elevator leading up to the main floor level. And then we have a floor level above that, which is primarily adults as well as reading spaces as well. So these are the other 2 floor plans. The floor level below shows approximately 24 parking spaces below the building. There's a ramp connector to an elevator and a stair that leads upstairs. The rest of the footprint is unexcavated. There is no function below this upper floor. If you were to take the elevator, you would end up on the main level. If you continue further up, you would end up in this adult area here. To the right, you can see the open space that I mentioned before. This is a 2-story volume, the main reading room, and the grand stair that leads up to this level. And this level contains adult stack areas, adult reading areas, as well as some conference room, individual and group study rooms, as you can see here, and then support spaces such as the office for the library director, support staff, technical support, and mechanical and IT rooms, as well as some mechanical space, which would be outdoors. So we've placed all the mechanical equipment off of the ground level. It's up elevated, so it would not be visible. And I think this would be the most appropriate way to handle mechanical equipment on this prominent site. We have been having conversations with the building committee about maybe adding an architectural feature on this level, maybe a balcony that would extend southward and southward into a veranda area. Why do I say veranda? Because I think the vision that we had in our office of this building is on the southern side to create a classic building configuration, which would be a veranda, which let me show you here. These are some pictures of classic verandas. It is, I think, one of the inspirations for this design, this configuration. On the southern side of the building, you create a sheltered area that is useful by the public. And remember, we have a connection that leads from that corner right along the southern side of the building into the entrances. And this could be a wonderful space for outdoor activity, reading, gathering, and as well as a pedestrian entrance into the buildings. And this is the way this is classically done in construction in these kinds of buildings. You would build a veranda on the southern side, and the building block would be behind that veranda. This photograph illustrates the current condition of the Prosser Library, and the landmark to the right, as you can see, is the church, this beautiful white church. But Prosser, which is sitting right now on a sloping site, is not that prominent when you compare it to some of the other features in town. So the concept here is to make it more prominent. So I'm going to share with you a sketch that Taisu did in my office. And this is his vision of how this new building could appear on this site. We're elevating the building site slightly. So this is slightly higher than the current ground level, but it's still handicapped accessible. And that veranda configuration, as you can see, is replicated here in a modern interpretation of that veranda. I did mention that we've been talking about maybe a balcony feature that would be on the second floor, located here, which would divide this veranda into a smaller scale components. So this building we envision to be built out of white material, still to be determined. White to make it relate to the church, as you can see here to the right. And it also has vertical elements such as the colonnade here, just like you see the colonnade in the church. Now, within this veranda, we see glass and another kind of material that's still to be determined, both transparent and opaque material, which allows some transparency, but also some screening. And on the eastern elevation, this is the elevation that faces the village green, we have transparent glass, and then constructed in front of that glass plane would be sunscreens. These are vertical louvers that would offer some sun protection, but also would allow visibility from the upper levels of the building. The lower part would be transparent, and then the upper part would have these sunshades on it. The upper floor at this end of the building has the reading areas that I described a little while ago, the adult reading areas. So this is a two-story configuration at this end, and that's why we see windows at that end, which will allow viewing from those reading areas outdoors. Now, when this sketch was done, the height of this building was 35 feet, this proposed building. Since then, we've had some revision work being done. So this was a quick daytime sketch that Taisu did of this site. And then we had a computer rendering done of a nighttime view. And this is what I mean by making it a very exciting feature in this part of town with this great transparency, so that people who are coming by can see activity in the library. Now, after we made those presentations to the building committee, we did get feedback from them, and they said, well, there are certain things we'd like you to do, and this is a listing of some of the comments that we received. They asked us if we could reduce the scale, do some more articulation on the exterior, maybe add some arched openings, adding a balcony, and these other things that you can see here listed on the left. So in fact, we have gone back and we've lowered the building by about 3 feet. So now it's about 32 feet instead of 35 feet in height. And we did some additional sketches. These are Taisu's hand drawings to show some options, such as incorporating some arches in this screen wall, such as creating some half round windows on the upper part of this building. This would allow daylight. These are like clerestory windows that would allow daylight into the large library room. And then also some more vertical elements, similar to the vertical elements that you see in the church. This is roughly a 2-story vertical element. And of these all, I believe the building committee preferred the features that are highlighted here, such as creating a balcony on the second floor to reduce the scale of this veranda, such as incorporating the half circles in the clerestory areas here, such as incorporating some arched openings in the screen wall. So this revision is in process right now. We expect to present another computerized rendering of this version to the building committee shortly. There's another feature that is important. We've been asked by the building committee to consider energy saving measures. We were asked, can we look at geothermal energy to be incorporated into this project, or perhaps photovoltaics? Geothermal, quite frankly, is not a realistic alternative here because the site is split by Washbrook, and creating an area large enough for geothermal wells to occur is just not practical. And we've been working with Downs Construction. They brought in a geothermal consultant as well as a photovoltaics consultant. So geothermal was eliminated from consideration. But photovoltaics are a very realistic option. And what Downs did is brought in this company called Verigy. Verigy did a thorough analysis of the photovoltaic panels that could occur on this building. And what they described this as an ideal footprint to be able to maximize the amount of photovoltaics for this building. The photovoltaics here would provide enough energy to serve the library building. They've even done some cost analysis and presented some options to the building committee for how to pay for those photovoltaics. But that's a subject still to be discussed with the committee and with the town council. I do want to give you a quick peek at the Mcmahon Library branch. You, I'm sure, are familiar with this as well. This is the view of that branch library from Blue Hills Avenue. This is an aerial view. The site is located at the corner of Rockwell and Blue Hills Avenue. And right now, the footprint of the existing building is this purple shape, as you can see here. That purple shape is roughly 6,000 square feet. It's a 1-story building. And the plan here is to add to the front of that building and transform its look from Blue Hills Avenue and make it, again, a more transparent looking building. It's a very blank looking wall right now for people passing by. And when we're finished with this project, it will be approximately 8,900 square feet. So we're adding about 50% in square footage. And that building layout is like this. The shaded area, I'm not sure if you can tell that this is shaded, but the shaded area represents the footprint of the existing building. And the unshaded area in front of the building represents the new construction. And this would be a new entrance, new vestibule connecting straight into the building, leading directly to the circulation desk right in front. We'd be renovating the existing building to create a new teen and children's area, and the adult areas would be placed in front. We do have some renderings of that as well, which I will show you here. This is one view of the exterior, and looking at it from a slightly different angle is another view of this building. We did receive comments from this as well. We'll be sharing some revised views of this building. I think the building committee asked us if we could incorporate brick into this exterior rather than a different kind of material. Okay, where are we in this process? We are approximately where this dotted line is. Actually, we're a little past that dotted line. We're right now in early June. And we're having this presentation to you today. And as you can see, we started back in October and have been working since then, trying to come up with this strategy. The plan is to go back to the town council. We've had one presentation with them. We're going back on the 14th of June, and then probably again on the 28th of June, prior to the library submitting a letter of intent to the State Board of Grants for library construction. And we're facing a deadline of June 30th to do that. And I'm assuming that the town referendum will be scheduled by the town council on November 2nd. And then after November 2nd, once the project is to be funded, then we go to the rest of the design process before we start construction. And the rest of the design process is probably 9 or 10 months of detailed work, starting with schematic design right after the referendum, and then going into design development. And during design development is when we start addressing a lot of the site issues that I'm sure are of great concern to this board, as well as to planning and zoning and other entities in town. So things like floodplain management plan, site utilities, traffic analysis, planning and zoning, wetlands, state and local environmental entities, DOT, etc. All of those get developed, and then eventually we will be applying for site plan approval, and that won't happen until August of 2022. So that's where we are in the process. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, quite frankly. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I would welcome your comments, and I'd be happy to go to any one of the slides that I presented to you.
Thank you. Greg, do you want to make any additional remarks? Hello?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, John.
Okay. All right. Michelle, you want to start it off? I mean, I guess you're on the committee, so, but we'll go in alphabetical order.
Oh, I'm not mute.
On mute.
Michelle, you on mute? Michelle, you're muted. You're still muted.
I think I finally got it.
There you go.
Okay. I would prefer to, being that I have already given my opinions at the library committee, defer to my other committee members first. Give them the first shot.
Okay. Neil?
Okay. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Thank you for the presentation. This is a big, significant project to sort of digest in one gulp here, and I'll try and be thorough, and yet I'd like to come back maybe later to talk about some things. And I'm afraid I might hit this sort of in a shotgun fashion, but I'll start with something that John was talking about earlier in terms of the pedestrian traffic and access to that corner. I think it's important that it's vitally important to this concept that corner be related contextually to the roundabouts and the future pedestrian traffic that is involved within that roundabout configuration. Pedestrian traffic's going to change just because of the introduction of those roundabouts, and it's going to be an important consideration, I think, to get right. And to understand how pedestrians will navigate those roundabouts. Again, a little bit of a shotgun, but you've talked a lot about the south side of the building and the importance of the south side and the colonnade, the portico, and yet the south side of the building has this sort of big gaping hole in it that goes into the underside of the building with a dumpster parked in front of it. And I think, you know, we need, if that side of the building is going to be important architecturally, I think the whole building should be important architecturally, but if there's a primary architectural statement being made there, some more attention's got to be paid to some of the elements there that, in particular, the dumpster, the access to the garage underneath, the landscaping and so forth. I like the connection to the Riley Lumber Company site. I'd like to see it, if it's going to be there like that, I'd like to see it a little more than just, you know, a little bridge and pedestrian walkway. I'd like to see it, you know, make, in my mind, a little more of an architectural statement, something that, you know, maybe reflects in different dimensions. Maybe as a little bump out where people can take a look at the brook, you know, something that makes it a little more of an architectural element that's connected to the building and connected to the parking lot. Right now, it just looks like a little pathway that's on a slope and has a railing, couple of railings on it. I know where it, and let me back up a little bit, because I know I've watched a couple of other presentations on this project, and I know that we're early on in the design of the exterior of this building, and there are opportunities here to, you know, to change and react to what's the public is saying, what our group is saying. And I think that's good. I think this is a great time to be able to interject these comments and let you guys respond to them. As far as the mass and the bulk of the building and some of the other relationships, a couple of words come to my mind when I look at this building. It's a very simple, rectangular mass that is articulated with the colonnade on the south side and a lot of glass on the east side. Of course, we haven't looked at the other sides of the building, but it doesn't have a welcoming presence to me. It doesn't feel like it's part of the context, part of its neighborhood. It feels like it's a foreign element within our town center. Maybe it's the severity of the, you know, the lines of the building. Maybe, to me, it needs, and I think they're your words, so small scale components. And they were on that was part of the list of feedback I think you got from your committee. More articulation to the building, making it more inviting, making people feel like they want to, you know, come to that main entrance, hang out there on that. If you're having that big front porch, maybe it's a little more than just the porch. Maybe it spills out into the landscape a little more, so that big plaza in front is something that's used and has a relationship to the green across the way, because right now it's just rendered as, you know, geoblock or something. All of those things kind of grabbing the pedestrian as they walk down the street and inviting them in with scaled items, landscape features, elements of the building. Maybe I'm not designing this building. I'm just throwing things out that to me say friendly and scale and that make me feel like I want to kind of cozy up to the building rather than think I'm going to an institution. I love your idea of inside outside with the glass and lighting it up at night and looking out from the main reading room into the out to the green. That's great. I don't know if there's an opportunity to even open up something that would, or tuck back in with some outdoor space back into that. I'm looking for things to sort of jog back and forth and move around a little bit in the footprint. But you've got a program that has to be met. In terms of program, I have a question. Is the two-story space, reading room, part of the program? Or is that deemed, an architectural feature that was, I don't know where that came from. Let me put it that way.
Well, I've taken lots of notes because
I know.
you've got some great observations, and I really do appreciate your observations. But in answer to your question about the two-story volume, that's an architectural concept that is not identified in the space program. The space program doesn't talk about heights of spaces at all. It just talks about square footage of spaces. Okay. It's an architectural feature that we are suggesting because we're viewing that space as the potential big living room space.
Yeah, and okay, so I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a minute. Sometimes you want an intimate space where you sit in the library and read and, relax and pick up a book and sit in the corner, rather than a big reading room like in, Hartford Public Library or someplace else. So when I look at that and say, wow, there's a big two-story element there that could actually be used to articulate the facade of the building, drop a ceiling, put in a sloped roof, manipulate that a little bit, sacrifice some of that volume for the sake of giving this building some more interest and scale. I don't want to spend your budget, but that's not changing any that's not adding square footage. And as far as materials on the building, I know that, in the past, whenever something sort of comes before us, everybody talks about brick. And I think in everybody's mind, brick is the compatible material with New England buildings. I'm just going to say out loud, that isn't necessarily where I am. I don't think it's entirely necessary, just so long as I like your reference back to the Congregational Church. Town Hall's got a lot of brick. Congregational Church is white. So white materials, glass. I personally am not a traditionalist thinking that we need to, do a traditional looking building, but I'm also somebody who thinks that this needs to be in context with its neighbors and multifaceted in terms of the the appearance of the building from all sides. I guess that's all I've got for now. But inviting and friendly are the key words to me. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention was there are a couple of really important trees on that site in the front. And I understand that they're being looked at, and I hope that's taken real seriously because you can't replace those specimen trees.
Thank you, Neil. Kevin?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the committee for their presentation. And I have a few things too. Just a couple of things. I know this is in the early infancy stages, but I'll ask. My biggest thing is the Fema flood zone, and obviously the 100-year flood elevation compared to the lower level. I think that it's 112.5. What's the 100-year flood zone elevation, and how have you guys planned to mitigate? We've had a lot more higher intensity storms. We've had a lot more 100-year storms recently. How would that how have you guys mitigated these in your plan so far? That's my first thing I have.
Okay. Well, I can address that a little bit. So we have had conversations with the town engineer about the history of flooding on this site, as well as what strategies we could take to mitigate that. So we're not going to build occupiable areas within the flood zone. We are actually creating a vestibule entrance at the lower level, which would be at least a foot, 6 inches or maybe a foot above the 100-year flood. And that's why the main floor is an entire floor above that. Right now, the existing Prosser Library has a lower level where the children's area is, as well as an entrance and a community room, which is below the floodplain. So we're not going to be doing that in the future. We're going to be building above that. The only part that's, there's not going to be any part that's in the floodplain. In fact, the lower level vestibule entrance is going to be, as I say, 6 inches to a foot above the floodplain. And the town engineer agrees with that strategy. He also observed and pointed out to us that there's a building right now on the Riley lumber site that is within the floodplain. That once that building is removed, we have the opportunity to incorporate the calculation of that volume within the entire project area. So we'll have more wiggle room, if you will, to manage the building above the floodplain, because the volume that is going to be will result after removing the building on the Riley lumber site will add to our volume capacity. So we're very well aware of the flood zone issues. We've built buildings adjacent to flood zones in the past. We do know what needs to be done and are prepared to do that when it comes to engineering the site.
All right, and I had a few more questions, but I think those in specific to the FEMA flood zone, but I'll save it for the wetlands because I am the vice chair for wetlands, so you'll see me again and I'll ask those questions at that point. So
excellent. I look forward to that.
But also the because I'll have questions about the footbridge and the footprint and building over Washbrook, and you're probably going to have Army Corps of Engineers permits and potentially, I'm not sure what you may need. So that's probably other questions I'll ask when we get to wetlands. And I agree, just so for I agree with Dick that, I'm not all for the brick facade, but I also, I like the way it's been presented, but I also believe that there could be a more, I'm sorry, I apologize for the text messages. I still think there could be a little more connection between the not only the south elevation, but the eastern elevation a little towards the town green. The south it's connected fine with the patio, but you're looking now to the apartments across the street. If you're more in the southeasterly corner, if you take south and east a little, I don't know if you're allowed to go up with the patio a little bit east, on the east face, to connect some of that town green in it also, I don't know if you can go to the full face. I mean, obviously with costs, I think that's something to consider. Can you pull up back the elevation view for the southern elevation, if you don't mind? The elevation view from the, I'm sorry, your proposed south elevation view.
You're talking about the lower level?
Yes.
This level?
Yeah, the elevation view now, if you don't mind. There was another one you had an elevation view.
Oh, it was a section, actually. It was a
Sorry.
cross, but similar to elevation. Okay. Cross section.
Right, and I think this is the part that, like, you know, Dick had mentioned about the dumpster being on one side, and, you know, if that's not as welcoming, you know, as you want to see, if you go back now to your south elevation view of your actual columns, I just apologize, I just wanted to show the correlation here. If there was a possibility to shorten those columns to move some over to the easternly corner, I guess, the southeasternly corner, so it connects into the town green.
Devin, I think what you're looking for is the drawings, not necessarily elevations, right? That he
Right.
showed before?
Just go back to one of your sketches. Go back to one of your
Richard.
conceptual sketches.
Yeah, the drawings that,
No, I wanted to see that cross section too. I thought the cross section showed the columns. If you keep going one more time, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The
That's-
proposed new sketches. I apologize. I should make note of the pages.
The sketches you showed.
Yeah, the sketches you showed. Whatever your last rendering that you showed, it probably showed the arcs in the cutout too. Yeah, like even like this one right here. If you go back to this right here. Now these columns, I assume, are trying to carry the dead load of that extended roof, correct?
Correct.
And that's the only load that it's taking on right now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and it's mostly well, there is some load carrying capacity there, but what I was saying, right where that tree is, we don't want to take it down, obviously, but if there is at least a small connection on the eastern side to the town green across the street here, I think that would be a little bit more welcome into, because folks will, instead of staring into these apartments, that'd probably be easier in the eye if you look over across to the easterly side. To me, the easterly side is more
Here.
easy to eyes versus the apartments in the south. But I understand the concept where you're going there. That's just something I wanted to throw out there on my part. Like I said, I love the connection with the town and the church. I'm sorry. And I don't need to see a lot of bricks too. I'm of a younger family and a younger generation. My kids use this a lot, and I think this would be more engaging and welcoming to them, because I think, you know, for that demographic I'm talking about. The question about the turnarounds though, Mike, have you done a cost estimate of what the additional cost would be to, I guess, update the exterior there to accommodate that turnarounds if it did happen? Because I assume you'd have to put in additional bricks, you'd have to put in additional whatever material you that you'd be using, I assume, right? Because you're at that point, you're right, it would be expanded, right? Your town, the property line would be expanded a little bit more, correct?
Right. So what we've been doing is working with Downs Construction. They've been doing the cost estimating for us, and they've prepared the cost estimates that we presented to the building committee. And I don't think we specifically asked for a cost differential for site improvements associated with public walkways, pavement, as a result of the roundabouts. We didn't ask for that. However, the project does have contingencies in it, built in for those kinds of uncertainties. So I think that it could be afforded. There's still a lot of uncertainty about the timing of those roundabouts and how much the state is going to participate in the restoration of public walkways. So it's difficult for me to come up with an accurate number in either scenario. I think the best that we can do at this stage is rely on Downs's recommended contingency.
Well,
Kevin, I
what
think
question-
Kevin, I think the town would have to be very forceful in negotiating with the state to ensure that any additional costs for pedestrian access were incorporated into the roundabout project costs.
I agree, John, but obviously with everyone strapped for cash right now, I would prefer to us to have something in place in the event that it needs to be if it did happen. And I don't know what's the statute of limitations in terms of our contingency and on the referendum and the contingency. And it may happen 5 years from now and that statute of limitations might run out on that contingency. But if we had at least a ballpark number of what that cost is, that way at least the town can we can either put it in our capital improvements for 5 years from now or find out what's the statute of limitations on that contingency. But we should have at least a guesstimate of what the additional cost would be to see what it would take to tie in, because we want to have a brand new building with a beautiful, a beautiful, really new developed area, only for it to be pulled up and then wait to figure out who's going to fix or repair it. That was just one of my things. And
I hear you. But I'll tell you that 80% of that project will be paid for with federal funds. And it's probably not, even if they start the engineering design in the next 18 months, project won't be under construction for at least 3 to 5 years. Well, this building, you're right, pending this building goes ahead, this building will probably be constructed and open before the roundabout is completed.
And I don't know if someone can find out what's the statute of limitations and that contingency. Let's say the project is completed 2 years, everything is closed out. And then 3 years later, there is 50,000, I'm just saying, left in their contingency. How long can that last to cover any additional work? Maybe that's something that town attorney or someone can address.
That's going to relate to the state grant.
So,
Mr. Chair, may I address that question?
Certainly.
Just a little more information. I mean, in general, the cost estimating that's done at this point, even though it's just concepts mostly, but they're all based on the largest build out, if you will. So the costs that we're looking at, that we're going to be proposing for referendum, would be based on the larger plaza and with the roundabout configuration. Now, but you have a good point, Kevin. If we only build the smaller one, yes, potentially we have the money to build the bigger one, but there may be some duplication of construction in making the changes from one to the other. And that's certainly something we can get into in the next 9 or 10 months of design as to what those differentials are. But it's not like we're not including the larger, the ultimate final design with the roundabouts. That we're looking at it from that perspective, that it would be that design ultimately.
well, good. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for
I
that.
think also it would be useful, Jose, if the town huddled with sooner than later with CONDOT and let them know that we are anticipating a significant rebuild of the library at this location. And we want to make sure that that the roundabout and it work together. So maybe we can encourage CONDOT to move their design efforts on the roundabout up so that they can coordinate better with us.
Yeah, I could talk to Jonathan. I think the state has already done some very preliminary work, and I think they need to, at some point when I think they're at the 30% design stage, they'll need to come back to the town and have a public information at that point. And as you said, John, it could be years by the time this actually gets started. Any construction there on the roundabouts, it could be. I would even guess 4 or 5 years after the building's open, that we'll see any kind of construction started. Given the time it takes to do the 30%, and have to come back and do various other final designs. But I'll make sure I talk to Jonathan, find out exactly where we stand, and that whoever's doing the design of CONDOT understands that what we're doing at that corner.
See if we can expedite them.
Yep.
Okay. Kevin, go ahead. Any more?
Yeah, I have a couple more. I apologize. It appears from this also that it looks like the And just to back up one more, I agree with Neil also that the Riley parking lot, all right, let's just call it the parking lot for the library. It is a little bland, and we would like to see a little bit of tie in there too. And even if there's a couple of park benches or something that ties it in and, makes it part of that, or even like the patio area you have here, or you put a little mini patio landing spot on the other side with a park bench or something, so that there's some sort of tie-in. You can even get a book and go out in the park, and I don't want to call it necessarily just a parking area, but it's part of the library, make that a little reading area or something, make it a little bit more inviting, With that said, though, I realize from your sketch, it's not a covered walkway or pathway, a walkway. Is there a possibility to have that covered so at least during the winter time, it's less, it's a little bit easier for, folks to walk across, especially if it's not cleared or clean. There's not as much snow over there. And also on the parking side, is there a possibility, and I know I'm glad you guys are looking at the solar panels, to get not covered parking, but at least a couple of parkings where we can put some more panels on there, if that's an option too.
All good suggestions, and some of which have been talked about with the committee, especially whether or not that walkway should be covered, whether we can put photovoltaic panels on it, whether or not we can put photovoltaic panels on the parking lot, maybe also provide car canopies that also have photovoltaic panels. All of that has been discussed. I think the question of additional photovoltaic panels needs to be settled by town council as costs above and beyond this basic building project. At this time, those kinds of canopies are not in the project budget, but a sheltered covered walkway for a pedestrian connection could be part of the project.
All right. All right, I just got a couple more and that's it. I know there's a lot more to talk about. On the other side, on the Mcmahon side, the parking that you showed it's parallel to the building, the new proposed parking on the other side. If you can go to that figure for me. And I like the idea, and I like how welcoming this is, and I love how you guys have kind of tied in the old with the new and updating it. And I was just concerned, though, the previous parking was kind of more perpendicular to the street. And this new proposed parking, it's like a harder, it's a harder angle for that, I guess, not necessarily the right turn, maybe the left turn in, but you're trying to make it parallel to the building. As you can see in this sketch here, right, that previous existing parking is literally perpendicular to Rockwell Ave, but with your new proposed, you're making it parallel to the building. Was that just an architectural thing, or what was the reason behind that? Does it give you more space?
This was an effort to demonstrate how much space is required on the site. We looked at different things. We even looked at the possibility of a new building on the site. So we were space proofing the site. Honestly, this was not done by a landscape architect with any kind of thought that is required for a proper site plan. Your observations are absolutely right on the money. The existing parking is normal to Rockwell Avenue. It's at right angles to it. I don't think there was a lot of thought given to the angles here. Making it parallel with the building may not make as much sense as keeping the parking at right angles to the street.
Okay, all right, good. That's fine. I know it's an early stage. The last question I had is that in terms of the referendum and timeline for the committee, the library committee, is there anything from our end that would hold you up so we don't make that deadlines? Because I don't see that there's anything detrimental that would do that. So I just wanted to bring it forward to the chair or to the committee if there's anything that they need from us for their January 14th, I think you said, I'm sorry, June 14th or June 28th meeting with the council for approval of the referendum.
If I can answer first, from my perspective, no. I really welcome your comments because we will share these comments with the committee as well as with the town council. We know that this is a process that we need to go through. I promise we will come back and continue this kind of dialogue and detailed exploration. So no, you're not holding us up.
Okay, all right.
Can I just add that from a regulatory point of view, the answer is no. They really, your board doesn't have any formal process until they have to come in for site plan before the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's where the zoning regulations come in. This is the village, and not on the Mcmahon side. On the town center side, it's a village district by definition, and it does have to come back to the board for a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission before they can act on it. So,
Aaron, and then the last thing I just want to add is that for my other two board members who are also part of the library board committee, just be mindful of what you say, because it also could, I don't want to have any perceived conflict of interest. So I just wanted to just say that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Mark, do you want to make comments now or you want me to go?
I prefer if you would go. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I can from my perspective, I support a lot of what Neil had to say. I think this is the way it's designed now. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. And obviously that it'll certainly be if it is constructed as proposed, it'll be I wouldn't want to call it controversial, but it'll certainly be a discussed building in town. The one detail thing is I agree. When I think of the bridge over to the parking lot, what comes to mind is, I think I agree with everyone. We ought to try and make that a statement as well if funding permits. And I think of the old bridge in Simsbury, which has all the flowers and everything hanging from it now. Obviously, that was an old bridge that was maintained, but that kind of statement bridge that's over the Farmington River in Simsbury Center, I think would go a long way to enlivening this location. What concerns me the most, quite frankly, guys, is consistency. When we've reviewed every other project that's come before us that's private, we have been fairly insistent on compatibility with the town center in terms of materials, roof slopes, setbacks, modulation, and all of those items, none of which this building has. And I think while it may be a great design, we need to be very careful if we're going to insist on all of the private projects that come before us, that they have slope roofs, that they have brick, that they have modular facades, that they blend in with, quote, the colonial town center. We need to be careful if we're going to go in a different direction with this building, which is fine if you want to, that we're going to, rightfully so, probably get some real pushback from both existing and future applications. I can go either way on this building. I think it's a very interesting design. I think it's a fairly bold statement for the town center, which is fine. I think it can, because it is so different, relate properly. But I do have a major concern from a consistency perspective in terms of how we apply our standards across the board. With that, either Mark or Michelle can pick it up.
Your choice, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I won't repeat many of the comments that my colleagues have brought forward, but I would say that I would have to agree entirely with the chair's comments with regard to the process that design review has followed up until now, with trying to make some sense out of architectural elements and how they relate to what we already have. When we look around town center, we see enough departures over the years that haven't paid any allegiance to that sort of thing. And it is a very divisive visual. So to bring that matter forward down into the area where we have the most compatible buildings that we have to deal with is a big challenge. And I take that challenge very seriously. The second comment that I would like to make, and I realize that it's not a matter that entirely is related to the design review board. It does affect what we do. I have yet to see any kind of financial analysis that's being done or any material discussion on the library building committee either about the wisdom of applying for a grant, what financial analysis we have that points us in that direction, and how that grant could drive both the size and the cost of the building. I am very concerned about what that means for our time frame. I realize that that decision is left to others, but I would just wonder what exactly we're commenting on with regard to a design which might have to change. I hope that's not the case. So the questions that I have, the next few anyway, go to Richard. And I would like to know when he comments that he thinks that the roundabout would coordinate with the sidewalks and the pedestrian movement. He thinks. Do you know that? Do you know that it will work, or is this a supposition?
Michelle, I know it will work because we did the overlay, the layout that was prepared by DOT, although it's a preliminary layout. And those sidewalks that are being proposed in those roundabout layouts do work with the future plan of the Prosser Library site.
Well, thank you, and I value your opinion. But as I have brought up in the library building committee, I think that that requires great attention to a traffic engineer for many other pedestrian concerns that I have. The second concern that I have is that the visual identity of the entrance where it is proposed, especially with two entrances, might have a confusing prospect for people coming into the building. I'm sure they could figure it out, but when you're building a new building, I think that should be really visually clear. And I don't think that it is clear. I understand that function can drive such a decision, but I'm not sure why we came to the two entrance situations on the main entrance side of the building. My next comment is that I'm not sure of how this time frame is working with regard to what the design review board will know and when it will know it. Because the majority of these changes that have been shown in the presentation this evening have not been discussed at length with regard to decision-making ability on the library building committee's behalf. So when we're talking about getting down to a June 14th decision, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Another question that I have for Ricard is, when you talk about white materials, what kind of white materials are you talking about? Just not asking you to commit to that, but what would be stereotypical white materials that you see this building using?
Michelle, there's such a wide range of building materials, all of which could be white. In the past, we've built buildings that have limestone on the exterior. We've had
what?
limestone veneer.
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying this is what it should be. I'm saying there's such a wide range that I think we need to explore that and then present those options to the library committee as well as to the design review board. But as an example, in the past, white material that we've used include limestone. It includes masonry, some of which may be precast, some of which may be glazed brick. We've also used wood with a translucent stain. So there's a variety of possibilities. We've also used metal. I'm not recommending metal in this particular case. We've used painted wood. For durability purposes, I'm not sure I would recommend painted wood. but translucent stained wood is a possibility. All of those that I mentioned come in white versions. So to be determined, Michelle.
Okay, I would have grave reservations with regard to some of the materials that you have mentioned, only because of the extreme maintenance requirements that we would have in our environment. And I would want to know what those materials were. It's very important to me to know that, and how they would function and what kind of maintenance they would be requiring over time and the expense to do so. The fact that there are so many details of this building that are not known at this point, I'm also uncertain how this process would work with regard to coming back for the second go round at the point that we go to the Town Plan and Zoning Commission with our recommendation, one way or the other. So I would not like to see a lot of time being wasted. I would not like to see either the architectural firm or any bodies that are represented here having to do do-overs. There's something about how this time process is set up, going to council and then coming back to us for a recommendation, that I really wonder about its efficiency, number one, and number two, how many revisions we're going to be talking about in order to get where we need to be, and when this would actually be discussed from the standpoint of the Design Review Board's requirements. Once again, I would have to say that I have the same concerns that our chair has with regard to compatibility issues, but also safety and traffic considerations at the entrance are one of my ongoing concerns. The last thing that I would mention is that I would hope that there would be some serious attention being paid to the hire of a registered landscape architect to come up with a plan that this site deserves, both from the standpoint of augmenting the building as it will be built and tying in the Riley property with all of its environmental benefit. One of the things that I have observed about the town of Bloomfield is that many times on our projects, we look at landscaping as an afterthought, and we end up with the lollipop trees being planted in a row. That's not what this site deserves. This site is worthy of a creative and a compatible landscaping plan, professionally executed and planted. So I would be looking for nothing less. How that's to be done, I could leave to others with regard to contractual arrangements, but I think it's very necessary. At the point that we have the revisions that we are seeing tonight, those would be my comments. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you for your comments.
You're muted, John.
Thank you, Michelle. Mark?
I want to say first, I appreciate Kevin's comment on any conflict of interest. Michelle and I, as stated, are on the library building committee. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I have not felt any conflict of interest. I think we're all working in the best interests of the town. But I would, Mr. Chair, if you have any qualms about that, I would be happy to, to hear anything about that, if there is any conflict of interest at all. I took copious notes while Neil was talking, and Neil covered all of my concerns, really. The architect's been working with us. Hopefully we'll continue to do that. There's many months of design to come. I think that the whole issue of consistency in the center of town, there's leeway in our guidelines, and I can quote some things that are right out of our guidelines that, such as create variety in the Bloomfield Center District. Because the Bloomfield Center District possesses an assortment of architectural styles, these standards do not offer any particular architectural style or genre. So, besides that as a guideline, I am so open to something new and fresh, but it has to be good design. And I think a lot of the comments tonight are talking about that, enhancing the bones of this concept, which I think are excellent. The way it's been laid out, the relationships between things, the sensitivity to all the different parts. And now it's time to enhance that. And I appreciate all the comments that have been made. I'm really in agreement with just about everything that's been said. I think a lot of concerns raised will certainly be addressed in the huge effort of design that goes on when all the other consultants come on board, such as traffic engineers and landscape architects, which are of course in part of the scale and scope of this project post referendum. So, I thank everybody for being open. I know there are factions that, Jonathan, as you said, you love it or hate it. The idea of something more contemporary may never please some people. But when you do look around the center of town, there is variety. And I for one am not into slapping a false mansard roof on something, which many of our buildings and towns have in the center of town. So I want an honest approach with design enhanced appropriately with the kind of details that makes it inviting and warm. And I'm confident we can get there based on, like I said, the good bones of this concept. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Let me just respond to one. A conflict basically has to be determined by you all. If you don't feel you have a conflict, it would not be appropriate for me as the chair to determine that you do in fact have a conflict. So if the members of the building committee who also serve on here feel comfortable, then I as the chair am certainly comfortable. And in fact, if you determine that you had a conflict and could not sit on this board, we would no longer have a quorum, which would make things a little difficult. So please feel that you do not have a conflict and carry on, and thank you all for your double duty. In terms of just one more last remark on the consistency, I agree with you. The regulations call for and allow for variety. I was more referring to, at least in my time on this board, our own individual board consistency. We have been fairly consistent in trying to have the more non-modern look, if you will. I concur with you, Mark, that variety is, from my perspective, is very important and very useful. And I think that this building and the way that the committee is headed could be a very fine addition to the town center, and in many respects would be a significant attraction in the town center, which I think of some of the libraries that are more, shall we say, colonial around the area. The one in Simsbury, the one in Avon, are very attractive and in their own right. And I think that this could do the same thing for the town of Bloomfield. And I thank you thank you all for the presentation, and thank you all for your continued efforts.
John, I think Michelle has her hand up.
Yep. Go ahead, Michelle.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to thank you for your comments with regard to conflict of interest, because I take conflicts of interest very seriously. However, I would represent my own opinion with regard to conflicts of interest, although I thank you, Mark, for including me in yours. I would believe that, number one, there are a lot of considerations that should be made on that issue, but it should be under a discussion with the board itself. I have no problem with it because I feel I am disciplined enough to separate my review duties. but I would be willing to listen to anyone who has a concern, certainly. So thank you for addressing it.
Thank you, Michelle.
John, I don't know how to raise my hand, so can I just
Like this.
And
make a couple
Okay.
more comments?
you need to go
I
like
can't-
that. There's also down on the lower, below the, at the bottom of the screen, there's a raised hand.
Icon.
I've been looking for it. It's hidden on my screen or something. I
On
don't,
your screen.
yeah, there's a conspiracy to hide these things. Wanted to say a couple of final things. The love it or hate it notion. I'd like to dispel that whole concept. I'd like us to have a building here that we're proud of, that has gone through a process that's yielded something that, you know, nobody's going to love everything, but I think this building is important enough that it has to be, it has to come out right. So, and I don't mean to pick at your words. I'm just trying to
No, you're
spin this to the direction where our process has got to work. And I think the other thing is our process is supposed to be designed to help the applicant move in a direction that, and hopefully we've been able to help them tonight. And the other thing I love Michelle's idea that landscape design and site development has to be integral to any successful design. And it's a shame that, I don't know if in the way this is, you know, the schematic designs and this process works, it's a shame that a landscape architect wasn't in the budget for design in the beginning of this. I'm not sort of wagging a finger at the building committee, but, you know, we designers, architects know that site development, site, you know, building placement on a site, critical notions that arise out of analyzing a site are the keys to success of a successful design. So Michelle's right on the mark with that comment. And we do ask our other applicants, you know, to make sure that they've taken a look at landscaping, building placement, relationships of, you know, elements on the site. So I think we're being consistent that way, John. And thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Any other committee comments before?
Kevin has his hand up.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Kevin.
I had my hand up, but Dick went ahead, but that's okay. We're good.
Dick's
Yeah.
not here anymore, so.
Neil.
Sorry, Neil. I apologize. Neil is. I'm sorry. So here's the other quick thing I had. I agree with the consistency part. I 100% agree with that part. But I think this, as most of you have been in building committees, we know if we ask them for, you know, addition to the roof or changes, that can be, for project this size, could be potentially, you know, $1 million. And it could potentially then take away from program space or take away from other areas. So that's why in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily have to be consistent to what we've done in other one. Each one is, we look at each project by themselves and what it does for that area. In my opinion, this is a community building for the town, and it's not a for-profit building. And we want this to be as inviting, and, you know, we want the usership to be, you know, higher than what it is now. We want to invite other people from other towns, just like how people go to Simsbury Library, West Hartford Library. We want to have them to come into our town. And in the long term of also developing the town center, we'd want that connection for future development. So I'm fine with the consistency and the variance right now, and not necessarily holding it to the same standards that we've done for other projects in the past, because it's a community building. And knowing what the cost effect could be if we ask them to do something that it may affect a program that affects our users in the town. I just wanted to throw that out there. That's all I had.
Thank you, Kevin. Greg, are you still with us?
I am.
Do
And
you have any final comments that you would like to make?
I do. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the thoughtful and intentional feedback and comments. Those are very helpful, and the committee will take that back and digest and give them serious consideration. I also want to say that I find, or it's my position, that this building has to be warm, inviting, and open, and I think that was echoed tonight. We are embarking on something that is new and different for the town. My position to people, because when we did our surveys, as I mentioned, we had 1,700 responses. Almost a third of those were from young people, students. And I tell people all the time that this library is being built not for me, but for my children and their children. And I think the younger generation wants to see a modern 21st century library. Doesn't mean that it can't have some of the features of this old New England town, but I do think that our young people, the people who will be using this building into the next 50 or 60 years, are looking for something different than sort of the traditional Windsor, Simsbury type of library building. But again, we are very open and willing to take this back to the committee, and want to thank you all for your time and for this process. But I do agree with some of the comments about some of the work that will take place in the future with respect to landscaping and traffic. All those things are on the timeline to happen, and really appreciate your time and everyone's feedback. So thank you.
Well, from the committee's perspective, Greg, we greatly appreciate your bringing the project to us to look at this stage. We encourage you, as I know you have, to at least listen to what we said, and good luck going forward. And we look forward to your return at the appropriate time. Either if you want another input from us, we're obviously welcome to do that. Or at the time you go for site plan review by the Town Plan and Zoning Commission, we'll have a chat then. But thank you again, and thank you to your team. And also thank you to the members of the building committee who are also a member of this committee for all the time and efforts you're putting in on what is going to be, I think, one of the most important public projects in town.
Thank you.
With that, if there's no further, we'll move on to staff reports. Any updates?
Yeah, just to let you know that the Planning and Zoning Commission hearings on Phase 4 have been delayed to June 24th. That's why you haven't seen anything from me. And that actually, that gives me an opportunity, because I just got back to work last week to go back over the minutes and make sure that I get you a draft of what your comments will be on that. So expect it sometime next week. And then once everybody agrees to that, I'll make sure the Planning and Zoning Commission gets it. They did approve Francis Politis's building as with your comments. I did report to them your action on that. So he's good to go ahead and hopefully get that, instead of waiting till next year. I think he lost his opportunity with one company. He'll be able to go forward with the other one. So
Good.
Other than that, you can see the 713 Bloomfield Avenue going up right outside my window across from Town Hall. So hopefully it's, once we start seeing the framing going up, we'll get a better idea how things work versus just seeing the plan view.
What's the status of the convenience store gas station that sort of?
I think they were just about ready. I think they were getting some company to stock their shelves. So I think they're getting ready. I mean, look like they've been ready to open for a while, but I think they ran into some code issues.
I bought gas 2 days ago from there.
Yeah, they're open.
Oh, they're open. Okay, so
They're
yeah,
open.
I asked last week. I didn't ask this week.
A couple of days. Neil?
I have a question, Jose. I think I mentioned this to you a while back. On that particular project, we had asked them for a list of materials and colors to be submitted to our committee. And I remember they submitted some colors and some materials, but I don't remember them submitting anything that had a orange and blue sign, Citgo sign, which is what they've painted the canopy now. And if they didn't, what do we do about it? Are we okay with it? What's our process for sort of dealing with things that, first of all, we should have a record of this.
Yeah.
And second of all, when we unearth the record, and perhaps we'll find out that, well, I know they didn't submit anything with orange and blue Citgo stuff because they didn't know who who was going to be there. What do we do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. You're right. I think at that time they didn't know who would, it'd been Shell. It would have been Shell was already in the town center, but it would have been a yellow canopy, and so each gas company has their own little, I guess, color schemes that they put up on. That's a great question. I'll have to look into it and see whether or not that there's anything in there that says they have to come back or to get approval of that.
Does the committee care?
Well, would TP&Z entertain us making comment like, we haven't seen anything on signage and we want the opportunity to comment on it?
Yeah.
Is presented to TP&Z? Would they?
Yeah, yeah, and the sign, quite frankly, the signage is really just is mostly a zoning enforcement officer approval. If it meets all the size requirements, he tends. Well, Mike's no longer with us, but he would approve it, sign off on the building permit. So the signage itself, the colors and all that, as long as they met all the dimensional requirements and setbacks, would not necessarily go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. But certainly, I think you can certainly make comments that in the town center, perhaps maybe they should, with input from the Design Review Board. And so, especially now that we're hiring a new zoning enforcement officer, hopefully soon, it'll be a good time to perhaps refer those get the commission to review the signage when it does come in.
It seems to me we ought to have, signage can have a very significant impact.
Yeah.
That we and TPZ, certainly within the village district, should have review and approval.
Sure. No, I agree. I think it's and I'll have to go look and see exactly what the design guidelines say about that. But if it certainly warrants some formal review by the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think the Design Review Board should also have a comment as they do for all the other elements of the site plan.
Right.
But other than replacing, I know, sometimes Village Pizza comes in and they replace their sign with another sign. What do we do in that case? I think we have to, right now they just get a building permit. I don't even think they need a building permit to replace an existing sign unless you specifically require it as part of your conditions of the commission's, EPZ's conditions of approval, saying this is the signage we've approved. Any changes need to come back. Changing out a face of a sign doesn't even require a zoning permit, as long as it's within the same frame.
Seems to me.
And it certainly doesn't require a building permit if all you're doing is changing out the face of a sign. A lot of times when businesses change, tenants change, signs change. They just have to make sure as long as they're not increasing the size or introducing any kind of elements like lighting that are not there already, they just do it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I can add that how that is traditionally done is from the standpoint of any conditions of approval that the Design Review Board has should be in the letter of recommendation. If then the TPZ decides to disregard it or not include it by mention, then I guess that's up to them. But from the standpoint of any kind of material specifications that we find are important, or color, not necessarily relative to logo, but if this applicant then decided to match building finishes to his logo, then that is a departure. So that should be included in the letter of recommendation to the TPZ, and hopefully they will honor our decision.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but just, Mr. Chair, just to be clear though, I mean, if in this case, it was basically a blank slate, what if he brought someone that we've never seen in the Northeast, you know, I don't know, BP or something? Do we have where at least we have to have some, give them some sort of control, or not control, but, you know, some, there has to be some potential of a line drawn somewhere, right? We just can't just, I guess, just leave it as a blank slate, because they can bring anyone from anywhere. And how can we stop that, right?
Well, we could, presumably, I mean, one would have thought we would have some control over the sign. I mean, a number of towns are pretty strict on their signs.
Yes.
It's certainly permissible under state statutes to do it. We've got the authority. Whether we've exercised it or not is another item. And I think, you know, Jose's right. We better take a quick look at our powers and the TPZ powers. And if we don't, I would urge the powers that be to amend the regulations so that we do have that authority.
Right.
Idea.
I'm on board with that, yeah.
All right.
So noted.
Any other updates? Any public comments still on, Jose?
I think we have, do we have anyone? We have one attendee. No, I don't know if they have any, no hands raised, but there's only one.
Okay.
We had up to 4 before.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting, and thank you all.
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much. Be well, be safe, and
Thank you, Richard.
see you soon. Thank you much.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Good
Thanks,
night,
Greg.
all.